Hello.
Everybody, hey everybody. Oh, I don't know what just happened to Olga, but we are both here. Um, I'm Julie Roginsky. This is Olga Lautman's avatar, but she'll be back in real life very soon. Thank you so much for joining us for this 4th of July edition of Pax Americana. And very sorry that we missed it last week. Olga had some stuff she had to do on Thursday. But more relevantly, we are very, very, very grateful to everybody who did join us later that night for our paid subscribers only chat on Zoom, which was just such a wonderful way for all of us to meet so many of you, because so many of you email us and so many of you join all of these shows every week, for which we're incredibly grateful. But it was just nice to be able to put faces to names and be able to have a real discussion. We are going to hold another one of these in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned for the date. We just have to work out our schedules. And as soon as we do, we will let you know. So if you are a paid subscriber to either Olga's Substack or to mine, doesn't matter which one, hopefully both, but doesn't need to be, we would love to have you join our chat. So,
I
Olga,
am coming right back. Sorry, I'm
yep,
having a technical difficulty.
no problem. So, Olga, I want to talk to you about what is going on with respect to Russia and Ukraine. And it's happening ironically, or maybe not ironically, it's happening, I believe, purposely, while the world's attention is diverted on a number of other things. It is diverted, of course, by the big, beautiful bill that I'm keeping an eye on as we're here today, but probably is going to pass any moment when Hakeem Jeffries stops speaking and they start voting. It
Can
is
you
going
imagine?
to.
I sorry to interrupt, but I really, really cannot believe that, Republicans have gone to the point of being so brazen that they want to really hurt tens of millions of Americans. It's sickening. Go
I
ahead.
mean, I'll give you an example. There is a Republican congressman, to your point, named what is his name? His name is, I believe, his name is Adrian Smith.
Mhm,
He is from Nebraska,
mhm.
and he, of course, voted. It will vote for this bill. He voted on the motion to proceed. He voted for the Rules Committee on the motion to proceed, basically. And there is a story that just came out of a town in his district um, that basically says the McCook-based community hospital is shutting down its clinic in Curtis. He represents Curtis, a town of about 900 people. The Curtis Medical Center has been open for more than 30 years. And here is the quote from the community hospital CEO, Troy Bruntz, that he just said right now. Unfortunately, the current financial environment, driven by anticipated federal budget cuts to Medicaid, has made it impossible for us to continue operating all of our services, many of which have faced significant financial challenges for years. The clinic will wind down its services over the next couple of months. So, just to be clear, it's not the inner city, quote unquote, poor people that they're harming. The people that use this hospital, I suspect, are not just people who are on Medicaid themselves, but it is people who just need access to a rural hospital within 100 miles of where they live. And unfortunately for them, the hospital is funded by Medicaid. And because the hospital is funded by Medicaid, even people who are not bound by Medicaid, regular, middle class, affluent, whoever, I mean, if you live within a couple of 100 miles of this hospital, you probably use this hospital. So if you're Adrian Smith and you are in Curtis and your wife has a heart attack and she really needs to get somewhere really fast, but you, Adrian Smith, are voting down in Washington. Of course, you have access to the best doctors and you have access to the best Walter Reed Medical Center and whatever else you need. But your wife, who also has presumably your health care, is home alone, as a lot of congressional wives are when their husbands go vote in Washington. And she really needs to get to the hospital. And it's not, you have a heart attack. There's no room for error. You got to get down there. It's people like her who are going to be screwed because good luck getting air backed in time somewhere else. I don't know what the specific amount conglomeration of hospitals are, whether there are others in the district. But for a lot of these rural areas, the ones that voted for Trump, there are not. There is one hospital for hundreds of miles around. And, I hate this phrase. Well, actually, I don't hate this phrase. I hate cursing because my dad doesn't like it, but I'm going to say it anyway. So sorry, Dad, if you're watching. FAAO. You're going to fuck around, you're going to find out. And that's what's happening right now. And when this bill becomes law, which it will be signed as soon as they send it up to him, today, tomorrow, the next day, next week, I'm not sure. We are fundamentally transforming this country, because I actually wrote a Substack column about this yesterday. But what I basically said is, I'll just read you the opening lines of it, because I think it's important for people to understand what's happening, right? Effectively, what a budget is, a federal budget is, and as somebody's worked in Washington, I know what the purpose of the federal budget is. A lot of it is to cram your pork and your little parochial priorities through. But fundamentally, it is a document that reflects the nation's values, right? Sometimes it reflects the nation's values in creating more infrastructure projects, putting more people to work, expanding their healthcare, expending more money for education, and so on. Sometimes it's this. And what this has articulated, this budget, is that what this country values today, in the year of our Lord 2025, is that the United States values concentration camps more than healthcare. That's all. That's all it is, because they are giving an obscene amount of money to ICE to build more alligator Alcatrazes. They are building more ICE detention facilities, which resemble, people get upset with me when I use the word concentration camps, but think about it. There's a difference between a death camp and a concentration camp, okay? There's a difference between a concentration camp at Auschwitz, although I know we use that term negligibly. So I don't use the word concentration camp by accident. But the gulags in Russia are concentration camps. Based on Abrego Garcia's testimony yesterday, CCOT is most certainly a concentration camp. So is Alligator Alcatraz, where people will be kept in intolerable conditions, surrounded by a swamp, in the middle of hurricane season, when it is 1,000,000 degrees outside, and if a hurricane comes, they will not be able to go anywhere. They will die. At which point it will become a death camp, by the way.
Can I
not just a
can I
concentration
just
camp.
chime in? I am so happy that you're saying this, because I was watching your your favorite show on CNN the other night with what is her name? Abby.
Yep.
And they put Democratic pundits on. You weren't on, because if you were, this would have been made known to the American people. And I literally wanted to bang my head. I sat there. I felt like I was in some kind of other, like, alternate universe. They are talking about this alligator Alcatraz, as I mean, the Democratic pundits showed their disgust with it, but they didn't raise the red flags that these are internment camps, concentration camps. We have now 13 people who have died in ICE. I remember hopping, going crazy, and trying to sound the alarm when one Russian died in a detention center. We have now 13 people who are dying in detention centers. And then they talked about the denaturalization of citizens. As if, again, they showed their disgust, but they didn't like address it as a danger that it is. Like, we literally, one, are building concentration camps on U.S. soil, and two, Trump's Department of Justice is threatening, prioritizing to denaturalize anyone who commits any vague crime without using civil courts, so it bypasses due process for the most part. And that will affect probably half of Americans, because people like you and I are naturalized. So, if Trump decides that we're speaking out too much or he doesn't like what we're saying, we can be denaturalized for, not for some kind of a sham crime that they, conjure up and whatnot. Every single person, I mean, if they're U.S. born citizens, in my case, my son is the first U.S. born citizen. Other people, maybe they are, but their parents aren't. So, I mean, this affects literally everyone. And the fact that it was just spoken about as if, like, I'm like, these people need to go live in Russia for like 2 weeks to understand what exactly is happening because we are building the largest police state, as you said, with these funds. We are setting up concentration camps. At the same time, they are using all the mechanisms of government to strip green cards, to go after naturalized citizens, to go after, frankly, everyone. And then again, Trump, while he was in this alligator shit, carried on how he's open to deporting now U.S. born citizens off to a gulag overseas. Go ahead. Sorry. But
Well,
I mean, I'm
to,
so happy that you're saying this because I literally was like, I know I'm not the crazy one. How am I
oh no.
watching this?
Well, I'll tell you that you're not the crazy one. In fact, I don't think any of us thinks the National Public Radio is crazy. And so I would say, let me just quote from NPR about what you said, okay? Because this is not Olga and Julie. This is National Public Radio. So it's a new memo, just to put it in perspective. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, which in real life is supposed to go after, oh, I don't know, things like racism. Instead, they're coming after people like Olga and me who are denaturalized. They put out a memo of their priorities. And there were many different priorities, not just denaturalization, but I'm going to talk specifically about the denaturalization one. Here's how NPR described it. And I want people to really listen to what I'm saying. It's a little long, but I'm going to read it anyway. According to this new memo, the DOJ is expanding its criteria of which crimes put individuals at risk of losing their citizenship. That includes national security violations and committing acts of fraud against individuals or against the government, Paycheck Protection Program loan fraud, or Medicaid or Medicare fraud. And then skips a few paragraphs and goes on to say other immigration experts point to another part of the guidance, which gives U.S. attorneys broad discretion to determine other eligible denaturalization cases. Quote, these categories do not limit the civil division from pursuing any particular case, the memo states, and priorities for denaturalization could include, quote, any other cases referred to the civil division that the division determines to be sufficiently important to pursue. So look, this is how it could work. First of all, let's back up. Any claim of fraud or committing acts of fraud against individuals. So that's a very broad term under civil law. Very broad term. But let's assume that you have been a complete angel and have not committed any crimes. I'm going to raise my hand here and say I've never been accused of fraud. I've never been sued for anything. Like, all good, right? But here's the part that's really scary. This means that any Trump-appointed United States attorney, think, oh, I don't know, Alina Habba, Janine Pirro down in D.C., pick your poison, right? Can refer any case, quote, in connection with pending criminal charges if those charges do not fit within one or the other of the other priorities in addition to any other cases the Department of Justice may want to pursue. So it is, as was once said, incredibly easy to indict a ham sandwich. The United States attorney, my husband's a criminal defense lawyer, he can tell you, you probably break 20 federal laws a day that you don't know about because most of them are not prosecuted because who the hell knows, you know. They can charge you with anything because they can bring anything before a grand jury and a grand jury can indict you for anything. At which point, they do not have to wait for that case to be adjudicated or even for a judge to throw that case out because what they know is judges have to listen to briefs and more briefs, and there's a briefing schedule. It takes 6 months, it takes a year, it takes 2 years before they even hear your motion to dismiss. And in the meantime, they can deport you. Now, let's be really clear about where they can deport you. You are stripped of your citizenship. And I'll use myself as an example. Olga has a slightly different example, which actually puts her in a much better boat than me. But, do I go to CCOT because now I'm here illegally? Maybe. Do I go to Alligator Alcatraz to figure out where I'm going? Maybe. Do I go to South Sudan where they've already sent people from, I believe, from Laos and from Vietnam who have no connection to South Sudan? Maybe. Or do they repatriate me back to the country of my birth? And here's the problem for me. The country of my birth is actually the Soviet Union. It does not exist anymore. I had Soviet citizenship through my parents when I was born there, but that was stripped of me when I was 6 years old when I left. So then we became stateless. At seven,
That's
right. At 7, I came here, still stateless, but with a green card. At 12, I received an American passport and American citizenship. It is the only citizenship I have had for the last 40 years. I have had no other passport. I don't want any other passport. I've always been happy to have an American passport. It is my honor. Till recently, it has been the honor of my life to be an American, to have an American passport. However, complicating things more broadly is that I can't go back to Russia even if they want to put me there, because I am banned from setting foot in Russia. Because if you recall, about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when they invaded Ukraine, the Russians put out a list of about 900 people who were permanently banned from ever setting foot in the Russian Federation. Joe Biden was on it. Lloyd Austin was on it. A bunch of senators were on it. I was looking at the list with incredible interest to see, like, oh, okay, Biden got it. And then I got down to the 700s or whatever number it was. And I was like, Julie Roginsky, what? Turns out I'm on it. So if I set foot back in the Russian Federation, if they deport me back to the Russian Federation, a country in which I have never lived, I've only lived in the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist, I'm not going to have a nice apartment set up in Moscow.
no, you'll be arrested right up on
Arrested
landing.
right away, show trial gulag, probably to spend the rest of my life in the gulag like my American ancestors, because the United States would no longer have to actually bargain for me because I'm not an American citizen. So why would they? So, like, understand, Olga, you were born not in Russia. You were born in a Western European country, so you're on your way here. So
But
you're better off.
but the thing is, this is the majority of the problem with this. The majority of naturalized citizens, when they accepted their American citizenship, they gave up their other citizenship.
Right.
So you only have one. I mean, there was a point, back in the days where you can have dual citizenship and keep your country's citizenship and then American citizenship. But same thing, my parents would be stateless because
But
hey,
you
call
were, but
handed.
you were not, but you were born, correct? You were
But
born.
but my parents at the same time,
Yeah.
when they applied because I was a child, they basically, what is it called? Renounced.
Renounced.
Uh,
Yeah.
all of the citizenship. So the only
Got it.
thing that we have is an American citizenship. So I mean, I would have to deal with Italy to see how this works. But I mean, for the most part, I think, and this is the big problem because a lot of people, if you're fleeing Iran or Russia or, any other country, I mean, the minute you get an American citizenship, you give up your other citizenship. You hand in your passport, rip it up, you give it up. And the only state that you know and have now is the United States. And this is the thing. And in that same NPR article, you went through the criminal aspect. If you look through the article, there's also a civil aspect where they
It's all
can
civil.
also, yeah, they can also, without due process, how you call it, strip you of naturalization. So, I mean, the whole
Well,
thing,
that's the whole point. And again, understand that it's, as you point out, it's civil for a reason. You have fewer rights as a civil defendant. You're not entitled to an attorney as a civil defendant. So, look, I just want to be very clear. Like, we always knew they weren't going to come just for the rapists and the criminals and the murderers and whoever you said, right?
absolutely.
That's not who's sitting at CCOT.
We've been warning about this
Yeah,
since we started this.
that's not who's sitting at CCOT. Um, he's not coming just for people like us who are naturalized citizens, which may not affect most of you. But I do want to also just say, raise a couple of other things that Trump has said about this, because I think it's important, right? Because it's not going to end with us. It's not going to end with people like me and Olga. Trump gave up the game in March. He went on Truth Social and he basically mused about sending Tesla protesters to CCOT. For what? Because he didn't like how they were treating Tesla, right? To CCOT, not to prison. Look, if you burn down a Tesla, you can
We
get.
have criminal laws here.
We have prisons here. Go to prison here. But he didn't want to
Yeah.
send them to prison here. He wants to send them to CCOT, and you only have to read Abrego Garcia's testimony about how he was treated at CCOT to understand this is not a prison. It is a concentration camp.
It's a torture chamber.
It's the same thing you read about. If you ever read Solzhenitsyn, Archipelago Gulag, the Gulag Archipelago, it is the same kind of thing, except this one took place in South America with heat, and that one took place in the frigid cold of Siberia. Same thing. However, then he said the next month, when Nayib Bukele was here, the president of El Salvador, and I quote, he said to him in the Oval Office, the homegrowns are next.
Mm-hmm.
And then he added of CCOT, you got to build about 5 more places. It's not big enough. But wait, like Ginsu 2, there's more. Because 2 days ago, I believe on Monday, what's today, Thursday? Monday or Tuesday, whenever he went down to Alligator Alcatraz,
Yeah.
he talked openly at a press conference about deporting American-born citizens. And this is what he said to Ron DeSantis as they were both touring Alligator Alcatraz. Quote, we also have a lot of bad people that have been here for a long time. Many of them were born in this country. I think we ought to get them the hell out of here too if you want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job we can work on together. Friends,
Yep.
This is a man who doesn't do things in secret. He always tells you what he's going to do next.
And just to add to the two things, someone mentioned Elon Musk. I think anyone who knows me by now knows I'm no fan of Elon Musk. And frankly, I don't care what happens. But that fight that he had with Trump, I mean, I literally felt like I was like watching Russian TV because you have him, except in Russia, they don't threaten it. It just happens. But he gets into a fight with Elon or, they get into a fight with each other. One, he threatens basically, to strip him of contracts. He floated last time around of, nationalizing Starlink and his companies. And you have the whole MAGA circle,
Yeah.
spewing this out that his company should be taken away and nationalized. Again, I'm no fan. I'm talking about procedures strictly. This morning, right before we got on, I was checking Russian news, and Russia took over another, I believe it's 9 companies that they took and decided to nationalize. This is what happens in Russia, and then the owners end up going to jail, falling out a window, whichever means of death, or going into exile as their assets get seized. We've seen it all happen, from the 90s throughout now. Then the other thing that, again, I'm no fan of his, and I actually didn't vote in this New York City mayor's election, and I'm not going to vote unless there's a normal candidate. But he talked about Mamdani and asking the Department of Justice to strip his naturalization and deport him. He's a naturalized citizen, and the only reason they want to do this is because they disagree with him.
Yeah.
And this is not how it works. You disagree with someone, you deal with it at the ballot box. You don't threaten to deport them, to strip them of naturalization. And then he had nerve to call him a communist. First of all, I'm so sick of MAGA throwing around the word communist. They really need to go and see what communism is and then get a taste for it to understand. But they were throwing he's a communist. And I just want to remind people that If Trump is so concerned about communism, he can look at Melania's father, who worked with the Communist Party of Yugoslavia and was a member of the Communist Party. And he could look at his ex-wife, Ivana, Trump's family, who not only were part of the Communist Party, but the father was an informant. Now, an informant for Czechoslovakian security services, which were satellite under KGB, the STB, and providing information in the 70s and 80s that Ivana was passing on our political landscape, on, who's going to win what election, on any information on Reagan at the time they were interested. And this is all documented in notes, that was declassified in Prague, I believe 2008. So if he wants to look for a communist, he can start looking in his in-laws live in the White House, or at least for a time. And the first term they lived in the White House, and the father said, I worked. He started off as a driver. He was part of the Yugoslavian Communist Party. And again, I'm not going to fault him for it, but don't go and throw around the word communism if you're so offended by it, when literally your in-laws were part of a communist party, not an imaginary one because you feel like, throwing the word communism about everyone, but an actual communist party. That's how the father made money, by selling, because of his connections to within the Communist Party. This is how Melania's father, fed the family and had a better life in Yugoslavia than the average person. Because once you, just like in Russia, once you were within the Communist Party and had hookups, basically, you had the car and you had, things that were not offered to
Yeah,
90% of the public.
of course. Let me say this. So this has been going on, this big beautiful bullshit bill that's been happening. We've had the diversion is not the right word, but the diversion from other foreign policy of what's been happening with Iran and Israel over the last couple of weeks. We've had certainly just the whole notion of alligator Alcatraz that they tried to divert from the awful ramifications of this bill, because every time Trump knows that that the narrative's not going his way, he'll talk about immigration. And while all of that was happening, and the media was chasing its tail, because despite the fact that the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and everybody else has incredible resources, they only harp on certain things over and over again, consistently. Pete Hegseth cut off military aid, Patriots, to Ukraine at a time when, Olga, Russia has been bombarding and murdering people in Ukraine at higher rates than usual.
Can I tell you the saddest thing?
Yeah, of course.
Ukrainians are going to sleep now. I mean, I want to cry saying this. They're going to sleep now with a whistle around their neck in case a missile hits their building and they're buried in the rubble. They can blow the whistle to let people know that they're still alive. This is how bad it's gotten. Russia sent over 5,400 drones in June, hundreds of ballistic missiles. This is what's been happening, and they're directly targeting them at buildings at 2 a.m. where people are sleeping. Every day there are scenes across all of Ukraine with people being buried, children being buried under the rubble, trying to find people. And this trend started specifically increased after Trump came back. So he came back January 20th, and you see this skyrocket of attacks. And I honestly, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but it feels like the US is providing weapons to Russia, because I don't understand how since March, you see a very clear trend. 4,000 plus, and you just see this Ukrainian outlet put a data chart out showing the past 2 years of attacks inside of Ukraine. And starting March of this year, it's like quadrupled. And it's only getting worse every single day. And now, as this is happening, like you said, Pete Hegseth, his policy advisor, Elbridge Colby, who frankly I can't stand for years, cut off quietly weapons that were sitting in Poland. They were already in Poland. These are air defense weapons. They cut them off. Putin right now is on the phone with Trump. He just had a, event this morning, and the Russian media reported at the event, he said, I have to cut this event short because I have a call with Trump coming up. So you have the U.S. now actively helping Russia in its genocide. Actively. They are actively doing everything to ensure that the maximum Ukrainians die to force Ukraine into capitulation. This is what they're doing. I mean, frankly, there's no other way to say it. And if, there is a commission one day on every country that has helped Russia, U.S. Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, and frankly, it's all the Republicans because the Republican Party is 100% not doing anything to stop this. They could have stopped it.
The same party that could have said that we're not passing your bill until you release this funding and until you release these missiles
And give more. Give more.
I mean, and don't forget, they're the ones from Lindsey Graham to Mitch McConnell to everybody else who constantly talks about how we need to arm Ukraine and we're on Ukraine's side on this and so on and so forth. There is not a shred to their honor.
Nothing.
Their reputations will live in ignominy for the rest of time. And I don't know what's going to happen to Ukraine. I don't know whether the Europeans will be able to step up.
They have to. They have no choice because they know very clear that if Ukraine falls,
They're
that
next.
a NATO country is next. They know this very clear. They have all the reports. Russia has increased their, what is it called, like breach flights, testing NATO limits. Germany had to intercept planes over the Baltics last week. I mean, they have been testing pressure points in NATO as they are preparing to further expand. And just to add, you have Ukraine fighting for their lives, for their country, for their sovereignty against Russia. North Korea announced that they're sending 30,000 troops now. As literally right after this cut in weapons. So North Korea, and we've already had around 10,000 North Korean soldiers fighting in Ukraine. You have, how you call it, Russia amassing 50,000 troops on Sumy on Ukraine's border to try to breach through there. You have Iranian weapons, that were flowing, and this is what is killing Ukrainians. And you have Chinese weapons and tech. So you have Ukraine, one country, fighting against Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, and now the United States, because the United States is doing everything to the point Europeans have asked repeatedly, can we buy the weapons since, America loves to sell weapons. Can we buy weapons for Ukraine? You know what the answer was? No, no, you cannot. Okay, so this is actively assisting a genocide. And Russia continues on their state TV every single day between politicians and propagandists saying that the ultimate goal is to erase all of Ukraine. This is their ultimate goal. They don't hide it, just like Trump. When it comes to this, they do not hide it. While the West was debating whether this is genocide, war crimes, what is it, what's happening, Russia is very clearly what I have a file that I was working with our former ambassador at large for war crimes. He now works in The Hague. And I was working with him for a few years. I have a file of statements, articles, opinion pieces, every single Russian, official from Putin himself, who again reiterated that there is no such thing as Ukrainian people, that this is a myth. Um, Everything from all his comments on down to the propagandists, because our former ambassador, he prosecuted the war crimes in Rwanda. And at the same time, he managed to get the media, the propagandist for genocide, because the propagandists laid the ground, the landscape, the groundwork for this genocide. And in this case, there's enough evidence that you could do the same if there's ever, a commission,
Oh,
a proper commission. I mean, the Ukrainians last week signed with Europe, a partnership to establish a commission to go after everyone, from military to everyone, specifically for this, for war crimes, crimes of aggression, and genocide. So he's been working on this, and I mean, they don't hide it. They don't hide it. This is not like, oops, we need NATO. If you listen to Russian TV for the past 5 years, you never hear about them talking about NATO. This is something they put out for the West, for their Western shows to say. Domestically, they have never mentioned that the threat of Ukraine is because of NATO. It's Nazis. There is no such thing as Ukraine. I mean, they have completely different, for internal purposes, of the reason that they're doing this. And NATO
sure.
is not one of them, unlike many of the Western shows would spread online to say that this is a NATO thing.
But let me tell you this. There is supposedly a deal that Trump cut for rare natural earth minerals in exchange for weapons. Is he just in violation of that now? What's going on?
He shifted off to Iran, so I mean, frankly, honestly, I'm
But was the
pleased.
deal ever signed? Like, I'm trying to remember because
Oh, they did sign the deal, but I mean, they did finally sign the deal. I
so
don't
are
know if
we
they
in
signed
violation? So
more
are
of
we
it.
in violation of the deal, or is it a memorandum of understanding, or is it an actual deal?
That I can't tell you. I
Yeah,
know that they came here to sign a deal. I don't know if they followed through and signed the final deal. I know that this was an intent for a deal when they came to sign it finally, I believe in May. I'm not sure on that.
yeah. I think it'd be interesting to explore. And we're gonna do that for our next show because this is a deal that Ukraine was not dying for. This is a deal that Trump basically Bigfooted them on and said, "You want our weapons? You got to sign this deal and turn over your rare earth minerals to us." And I guess Zelensky had no choice but to say yes. But this would be a good, I guess we'll do it since nobody in the corporate media is looking into it. But
I
are
don't
we?
even mention
No,
Ukraine.
not even mentioned. Not even mentioned. I mean,
Then
none of this is mentioned.
and then you know what makes it even more frightening? You know, Albert Colby unilaterally shut these weapons down himself. He decided nope. And I mean, again, anyone who's followed him on Twitter, you would understand why, because he's definitely in the Kremlin still for years. And he's an interesting one of the ones in the think tanks where Russia's not the threat, it's China. We need to look at China while repeating Russian propaganda, World War III, if we assist Ukraine and whatever. So he is a very interesting, person to begin with. Definitely pro-Russian, definitely a loyalist, definitely on the same page of spreading their disinformation and propaganda. But he unilaterally, according to the reporting, canceled this weapon, said we need a review now because we don't have it first or half of it. They were sitting in Poland. I mean, the weapons are in Poland. A few of these weapon types we don't even have need for. Anyway, the scariest part of all of this is that it blindsided the State Department, it blindsided Congress, it blindsided European allies. So you have, I mean, Again, whether Trump himself ordered this, in this case, it doesn't look like he did it, but you have someone who is in the Pentagon in kind of a very, higher up position who can easily dictate a policy without coordinating with the State Department, without coordinating with Congress, without coordinating with European allies. Now, today it's Ukraine. What about tomorrow if it's Taiwan? What if it's another issue? What if it's Iran? So you have rogue actors running around and doing basically what they please. So I don't even know if it's more scary of the fact that they are not, that we have rogue actors and shills sprinkled through, and God knows there's, no end to the Russian shills sprinkled through all the agencies, starting with Tulsi Gabbard to, Ed Martin to I could go on and on. So they're sprinkled throughout Department of Justice, Pentagon, Department of National Intelligence, how you call it, pretty much all the agencies. So what is more scary, if this was a concerted U.S. government effort, or if this is now individuals can really change the course and do what they want without even alerting the State Department? And what is the State Department doing about this? I mean, Rubio's playing two roles, or three roles he has. And again, this is today it's Ukraine, but this is our national security. For anyone who cares about not having another terrorist attack on U.S. soil or us getting into a war with another country because there are rogue actors who, take a step to initiate one. I mean, this is really scary. And this is one incident besides the heartbreaking, you know, decision to do this and what's happening in Ukraine. Then you have to look at the other aspect that we literally have between Tulsi Gabbard. That whole Iran thing was insane, but the fact that she put out a video basically warning that we were going to take action and Israel was going to take action 2 days before uh 2 days before Israel started their strikes, 2 days or one day after Israeli officials were in DC for meetings coordinating the strikes. And then she puts out a nuclear, war video that no one understood what was happening. And why is this video out? Everyone, in Ukraine thought that she's trying to signal something to the Russians. But in this case, it was signaling to the Iranians. So,
Listen, just to talk, I looked at the deal. So yes, the deal was signed on April 30th of this year. It was a comprehensive minerals for reconstruction agreement, but I think somebody pointed this out in the chat. It was actually, you're right, not for weapons. It was even more interestingly, this deal only goes into effect if there's a reconstruction, which means that of independent Ukraine, which means that the United States would basically have to guarantee the safety of Ukraine for them to both extract the rare earth minerals, but also to get to be able to pay our share, I guess, for reconstruction. So what's fascinating about that, of course, is that deal will be null and void if Russia ever takes effect, and we can cut our own deal with Russia for rare earth minerals in exchange for
which is what Russia has been proposing.
which is what's going to happen. He's going to sell this deal. So now that more I think about it, this deal was a diversion. It was a way to pacify the West and to pacify NATO allies and to pacify, most importantly, Congress, probably, while he got through the big, beautiful bill. And now that he has or is about to, Ukraine could be kicked to the curb.
I mean, it pretty much has been.
Understand, he just got, I don't think people, I want people to understand what he just got if this bill becomes law. We haven't had a budget signed since the Clinton years. It has been continuing resolutions over and over and over and over and over again. He has just gotten a chunk of change, the likes of which will be felt by everybody, not just people in this country, but across the world for generations. And he does not have to go begging anymore. which means that he can now start cutting deals that benefit him and nobody else. I mean, that's where we are.
Yep.
That is what the United States Congress and all its fecklessness has just given him, or is on the cusp of giving him today. And all of these same people who said, heavens to Betsy, I can't vote to do this to my constituents, and I can't do this. The worst elements of this budget don't come into effect until 2027, until after the midterm elections. So they're just thinking they're going to get through the next couple years, and then we'll see what happens. Good luck. Good luck to everybody who thinks in the next year who's going to buy into the propaganda the way they're buying into the propaganda now, that everybody yelled about tariffs, but you see the economy still operating at full speed, and so of course this tariff scaremongering didn't matter. In the same way that people are going to say that you're going to be thrown off your health care, but it's 2025, 2026, nobody's thrown off their health care. This is all scaremongering. They postponed this. That's why Trump postponed this tariff deal with all these countries that is supposed to go into effect now. If they don't come to a deal in the next, week or so, Olga? That's not going to happen either. Because he tacos about stuff like this, but he doesn't taco about the stuff that really, really matters, and that is hurting Americans. And as you and I have said from the beginning, he is a Putin stooge. And I don't know if Zelensky truly believed him on that deal. And I don't know if that was all performative in the Oval Office. The more I think about it, the more it probably was a few months ago of kicking Zelensky out, only to bring
Oh, that
Zelensky
was an
back.
ambush.
But it was an ambush, but was the whole purpose of the ambush to make Zelensky feel like you're persona non grata, and they'll lull him into a false sense of security when they came back and said, okay, we'll sign this deal, knowing full well that they would never intend to honor it, because there would never be a Ukraine from their perspective to actually have to protect and resurrect and reconstruct, because they knew that they were going to do this, and they did it under cover of night. That's when Peter Hegseth did this, under cover of night, while everybody else, including the corporate media's attention, was focused on what was happening with the big, bad, beautiful bill.
Pretty much.
They played him.
Yep.
They played everybody. And as much as everybody could sit here and say Trump's a moron and he's an idiot, he's not. He's not. He never has been.
I've always said the media got him wrong in 2015, 16, when they found him entertaining and off the cuff and, and everything, and didn't take him serious. And I mean, there's a reason I became obsessed with him in 2015 and 16. I mean, I've never been this obsessed with a U.S. politician. Frankly, I don't care about U.S. politics. But saw all the tactics. The tactics were out of a typical dictator playbook. And while the media and, everyone thought, oh, he's off the cuff, these were very strategic. I said, this is strategic chaos. It causes chaos strategically, so people don't take it serious. You remember how laughable now when they were waiting week after week. Oh, this might be the week he'll be presidential.
Oh, remember when Van Jones, after Trump did something remotely non-psychotic, was like, this is it. This is the week he became president. Remember that? He became presidential.
Yep. And if you look at the tactics from day one, he stepped off the escalator, that gaudy escalator, and you saw automatically an attack on media, which is a tactic of dictators to lay the groundwork for delegitimizing the free press, an attack on the Mexican judge, and an attack on MS-13 and everything. These were all strategy. This was all planned and strategized very well, thought out. But of course, he comes off as the bumbling idiot, and people mistook didn't look at the strategies that he was enacting. This is why I, like I said, became involved. This is why I got onto Twitter in 2016, because I was like, I didn't even know anything about Twitter, and I was hopping out of my skin, and everyone's like, just go on Twitter and, put out your conspiracies at the time, which conspiracies ended up being right. Um, because like I saw these tactics, they're as clear as day. Anyone who deals with Eastern Europe, here it's like an exceptional thing if you have someone who espouses to be like a Putin or a Nazarbayev or like any of these dictators. Here it would be like an exceptional thing, like this we're America, we cannot have this, and this is such a you know like unimaginable. But in Eastern Europe, they like this is another Tuesday. I mean, do you know how many Trumps there are in Eastern Europe who, come to power, who use divisive tactics, polarize the country, find scapegoats like minorities or immigrants or whoever it is in their country, delegitimize the free press, attack opposition, have opposition arrested. I mean, this is another Tuesday in any of these countries. And this is why, here, I mean, the press really failed
Well,
us and continues to fail us.
I'll tell you how much they continue to fail it. I did MSNBC last week, and this is MSNBC now, right? This isn't even CNN, which kind of tries to have it both ways. MSNBC, is as pro the resistance as you can get in cable news. And the segment devolved into, do you really think that Trump knows what's in this bill? Do you think he understands what's in this bill? And what do you think the motivations are for him? Because he can't possibly know what's in this bill. What do you think the motivations are for the members of the Senate who are voting for this bill? Do you think they understand what's in this bill? And I finally lost it. It kind of the clip went viral, actually. If you go to my YouTube page, it's on there. But uh, I just lost it, and I said, why do we keep treating him like a moron who can't read? Why do we keep giving him passes? He can turn on Fox News. He can crack open the bill. He can read it himself. He can go
He
to a
has
non-propaganda
advisors
outlet.
to read him bedtime stories.
I mean, I don't know. Go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, what does this bill do?" If you don't want to read the whole thing. I mean, there are ways to find out what's in this bill if you are so inclined. So why do we keep constantly giving him passes by being like, there, Donald Trump doesn't really know what's in this bill because he told a bunch of senators or Congress people at a retreat this week that the three things they can never do is cut
Uh-huh.
Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Notice reported this today. And some senator, congressperson, I think it was a congressperson, said, but Mr. President, we are cutting Medicaid. Like, oh my God, we are cutting Medicaid.
All theater.
This has been going on since the day he came down that escalator. Before this came down, listen, this came down when I used to see him. I used to work there on Fox and Friends every week. He wouldn't even come to Fox and Friends. He would literally phone in his pajamas and MF Obama start to finish and talk about how Obama was not a natural born citizen and how he was here illegally
That
and yada yada.
strategy. Who, sorry to cut you off, but
Strategy. Of course, he
who,
knew he was appealing
who,
to.
who for the past 70 years has been trying, literally, had a whole unit trying to set off a race war in this country? The KGB. They know this is a very sensitive topic, and anytime they find any kind of hint of a division, they automatically hop on it. Sometimes they manufacture it themselves. They,
Yep.
had informants around Martin Luther King. I mean, this is something going on since the 60s. The fact that
Yep.
he hopped onto this birtherism, there was a very, again, strategy. This wasn't a random that he woke up one day and said, let me attack Obama and, claim he's not a U.S. citizen. This was a very concerted effort from 2008 after Obama won through 2016 to delegitimize him, to delegitimize Hillary Clinton, and to basically prepare you for the 2016 election. And I can tell you exactly when it happened. In 2007, the Russians started noticing when Obama started gaining that you had a swath of Americans who were pissed off that there might be a black president. By 2008, they sent advisors to meet with Republicans because they saw images of people and reading stories because Russia's 24/7 in our news cycle, burning effigies of Obama because they couldn't handle the fact that we had a black president. And they literally sent advisors in 2008 um, in order to capitalize off of this. And the whole, email thing, the whole I mean, this was all a concerted effort for 2016. Russia doesn't think, like Americans, uh, what, like tomorrow, what happened yesterday is old news a century behind. They play a very long game and they have the same playbook, and race, religion has always been in their playbook.
But it predates even that, Olga, because
Yeah, absolutely.
for those of us who grew up in New York, the Central Park Five happened.
Yep.
There was, completely vindicated these five young black men who were happened to be at the wrong place, the wrong time in Central Park. A young woman, a pretty white woman, had been raped, um, going jogging in Central Park. This is going back to I believe, the 80s. And if not the early 90s, but I think it was the 80s.
80s.
And and who decides to take out an ad in the New York Times calling for the death penalty for these people, for these boys, after it was already pretty clear that they were not the guilty parties here, but Donald Trump. And I've always wondered, where did he get the money to do that? Because he had no money at the time. Who
Where did he
paid?
get the money
Well, we
to
know. I
attack?
mean, listen, I think we know, right? But it goes to your point, right? It's money and it's substance, and the substance was always in tune with what you were saying, which is you're absolutely right. When I'll give you an example. When we first moved here, my parents, I had a cousin who had been living here for, you know, 40 years earlier, and they had an apartment on 83rd and Madison. And we had just arrived here. She took us to her apartment, and we were completely blown away because obviously we were living in the Bronx, and she was living in this amazing Upper East Side apartment right across the Metropolitan Museum. But I say this to put in perspective of what happened next. My mother had a very, very, very close friend who had immigrated to the United States a few years before we did, and had ended up marrying an American professor at Columbia. And Columbia is on the west side of Manhattan, and where we were visiting my cousin is on the east side of Manhattan, and Columbia's in northern Manhattan. To get there, you have to walk through Harlem, which was then totally fine to walk through. I mean, it was 1980, so it wasn't as great as it is now, but nevertheless, like, it's no problem walking through Harlem, excuse me, during the day. This was not like, oh my God, you're going to get shot and murdered if you do this. My mother and my father, I just remember, had this blowout fight. And by the way, if my parents are watching and they deny this, don't deny it, because I remember it like it was yesterday. Blowout fight because my mother was like, we can't walk through Harlem. We can't walk through Harlem. It's the scariest, most awful place on earth. We're going to get killed. It's going to be awful. Well, where did she get that, having just gotten off the plane from Moscow? Because it was instilled in us from day one that there is this part of New York City. You all think New York City is this great place. It's a race riot hellhole where white people get knifed and killed and murdered and shot by black people all day long in this part of it called Harlem, which I think in their imagination probably took up 90% of the city of Manhattan. So, completely conditioned. Every time the United States would lecture the Soviets about the way they treated their Jews, the response was always, well, how do you treat your black people? They loved it. They loved it. It was just something that they would consistently use. And Trump was just so always in tune with that. Now, was he in tune with that because he grew up in a white resentment kind of, he wasn't blue collar himself, but in Queens, so he never quite, felt like he belonged on the upper echelons of society in Manhattan? Is that where that resentment comes from? Is it from that? Is it because he was
And
taken
it's
out
from
front? Who
Ivana.
knows?
I'm sure it's from Ivana, who was because where did a real estate playboy who was wild and like had the worst reputation in the 80s, why would he suddenly care about what the US does for Japan? Why would he pay for ads to say that the US is helping their allies and we need to stop helping our allies because they take advantage of us and basically we need to break all our alliances. And this is 1987. So, I mean, clearly a playboy who is here busy, running around woman to woman, that, and at the same time in 86 he wanted a Soviet ambassadorship. He wanted a post to the Soviet Union to solve the nuclear crisis. So I mean there's a lot more there, but to finish up, let me go through some good news.
Okay.
One thing happened this morning. The deputy chief of the Russian Navy is dead. Ukrainians apparently sent HIMARS into Kursk, and there was, at least according to Russian military bloggers, there was the location was hidden. 20 plus Russian soldiers died, including with it the deputy chief of Russian Navy. Russia in the morning. Oh, well, overnight denied it, but now they have confirmed he's gone. One less, sociopath, and that's it. So this is good news. Another thing I'm paying very close attention to is Russia and Azerbaijan. And for those who don't know, Russia and Azerbaijan have always been very close. I mean, um, one of the closer people to Putin is Rasa Galarov, who is Azerbaijani himself, who was Trump's business partner, who at the time during the 2016 election wanted to set up meetings directly with Putin between Trump when he was a candidate and who was involved Trump Tower, Miss Universe, and a million other things. So it's very interesting to see this and where it's going to go because it started off when Russia shot down the Azerbaijan airliner. I believe it was last year or the beginning of this year or the end of last year. So they shoot down this airliner. They deny it. 200 plus people died from this plane crash. And now the Azerbaijanis, a few days ago or last week, released information of the person in the Russian chain of command who gave the order to shoot down this plane. So they have all this information. This infuriated the Russians. And on top of it, the Russians carried out some operation inside of Russia. And in the operation, they ended up detaining and killing two native Azerbaijanis because you have a lot of Azerbaijanis living inside of Russia. This infuriated the Azerbaijani government, and they were up in arms, summoned, the Russians to find out why their citizens were killed in this operation. And then on top of it, the Azerbaijanis, like this has been building up, searched Russian offices and media outlets in Azerbaijan. So, this rift is getting extremely public, extremely volatile. Azerbaijan is a key partner for Russia, was the key partner. I mean, and now you're seeing this big rift. And interestingly enough, the reason Azerbaijan, I suspect, feels so emboldened, and they even, you know, uh, publicly, a few people, which would have been unheard of a few months ago, supported Ukraine. So I think they're being emboldened by Turkey because Turkey is the, um, key, like, guarantor of their sovereignty. And this is interesting because it looks like Turkey is flexing their muscle. Um, Azerbaijan feels emboldened to go push back against Russia. And you know better than I, in any other normal time, if it was Azerbaijan without protection, Russia could have shot down 5 airliners. They wouldn't have peeped the word. But this really, like the fact that they approached it, released all the intelligence on it, and really have been going after Russia to, how do you call it? Make them admit that they did this. And I'm trying.
Keep your eye on Armenia. Keep your eye specifically on Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a contested region between Armenia and Azerbaijan,
Oh,
um, to see what Russia does next. Russia has always had a close relationship with Azerbaijan for sure. It's also had a very close relationship with Armenia. They're both, Armenian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. The Russians feel they have more in common with Armenia as a Christian nation they do with Azerbaijan. Um, and but they're both former Soviet republics. And if I'm the Armenians, I am looking with trepidation towards Ukraine because you're next on the chopping block, potentially, my friends in Armenia. Uh, and the other thing, not to go too down the rabbit hole, but Turkey is now losing a tremendous amount of influence in Syria, which it always exerted. So I guess it's now looking towards the Caucasus. It's looking towards the east. And we'll see. We'll see, because the Turks, Erdogan and Putin have had a grudgingly, I think, good relationship. You tell me, Olga, but I think they've gotten along ish.
They see the Turks are very transactional.
Yeah,
This is
as are
how
the
they
Russians.
are. They're very transactional, and I had to deal with the Turkish during after the full scale invasion privately. The government wants Ukraine to win. Privately, they resent Russia for what happened to the Crimean Tatars. There is they have their own lineage to Ukraine, and they resent, and privately they want Ukraine um, to win this and to basically, put Russia back in its place. They did start sending drones to help Russia, but they won't go too much out of bounds because they don't want to really piss off the Russians. But interestingly enough,
They're a NATO country, I might add. Let's all remember, they are a NATO country, by the way.
yep. And just to show you, the Russians are scared of Turkey because I believe it was what, 2017, 15. But anyway, the Turks shot down a Russian a fighter plane over Syria. The Russians nothing. I mean, nothing. Like they did not want to get into it. And just to remind, since we're in Azerbaijan and Armenia, Turkey and Russia has already fought 2 wars, proxy wars in Azerbaijan, Armenia. Then it was Libya that Turkey and Russia fought a proxy war a few years ago because the Russians pulled Syrians out to go fight to prop up Haftar, and the Turks went in on opposite, and they fought a proxy. So Turkey and Russia publicly, yes, 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 but privately, they really don't like each other. Russia last year, Russian officials threatened Turkey did something, and Russian officials threatened one of their coast and said, "Oh, if you continue talking like this, we're going to seize this land from you inside of
Well,
Turkey."
don't forget, look,
And
listen,
then the Black Sea.
and the Black Sea, don't forget, they've got the Black Sea Fleet now, which they've now put in Crimea, um, because they've put it in Sevastopol, which is in Crimea, which of course is Ukrainian land. That's a spit from Turkey. That's the other side of the Black Sea. There's only one other thing I want to say about the Turks, and I'm not a Turkish expert by any means, but I have spent time there and I have spent time talking to Turks. And there's one thing, as transactional as they are, that they will never transact on, ever. And that is the Armenian genocide. You will never, ever, 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 on pain of anything, get them to admit that they participated in what we all know was the Armenian genocide in 1918 that killed an inordinate amount of people and set the predicate to what Hitler did next. And in fact, when Hitler was asked about the Jews and are you sure you should be doing this? Hitler's response was, how many people today remember the Armenians? So the Turks showed others in the 20th century the way as to how to commit genocide. And they did. And there's no debate about that, even though Turkey would, you know, MF me up and down for the next 20 years for saying so. The Russians have never acknowledged formally the Armenian genocide. Very few countries have. France was the first, I believe, of the big countries.
I think
But
we actually did finally last
but
year or 2 years ago.
we did, yeah, we did. But after a lot of work, my old boss, Congressman Frank Pallone, was very close to the Armenian community and spent a very inordinate amount of time, 30 years, I think, in Congress trying to get this done. But I will also say that the Russians know what happened. They're not in denial over their Armenian genocide because they tend to, again, because Russians tend to, when all else fails, we'll go with the Christians, we'll go with the people we consider white. They'll go with the Armenians before they'll go with the Azerbaijanis. They'll make fun of the Azerbaijanis a lot more than they'll go make fun of the Armenians. And I don't know that they want to deal and put up with with Jordanian. Sorry, my dog is moving nuts here. If they want to go, we could have a whole separate show on this, and I don't want to belabor it, and we're getting late. But other than to say that what is happening in the Central Caucasus, I think is something we should all keep an eye on, because I think while Putin is so focused on everything else, he may be sleeping in what's happening in the Stans and in the Caucasus and in Central Asia.
And I'll just add one last thing that Russia also with Armenia burned their bridges because a few years back when Azerbaijan and Armenia, well, two things happened. One, Russia, after the full-scale invasion, wanted Armenia to send troops to Ukraine. The same thing. They requested troops from Kazakhstan and several countries under their bullshit, NATO thing that they have, that organization. Um, anyway, so Kazakhstan at the time said no, Armenia didn't send anyone either. And then Armenia needed help when a few years, I believe it was in the end of 22 or 23, they asked Russia for assistance when things flared up with Azerbaijan, and Russia denied the request. And after that, I don't know why I'm so tired, but that organization, their fake NATO, that they formed, that Russia
Yeah.
launched. Anyway, this commission basically, or organization basically, fell apart. And Armenia, for the first time, very publicly, said that this is basically a useless organization, and we don't want anything to do with it because this is definitely not like how NATO is structured, where if an Article 5 is triggered, then all the other countries collectively will come together. So there have been things brewing with Armenia too, and Russia, I had was following closely last year. Russia was doing a lot of shit inside of Armenia to try to overthrow what's his name, Pashinyan. So there's a lot of happening in the region. Interestingly enough, though, because they are losing control over the region. So
Yeah, and I
ultimately,
think that's the whole point. I think that's the whole point of what we're saying. I will just add one more thing. I know at the start of the war, when there was pressure on all these other countries to vote against Russia at the UN,
CSTO. I'm
yeah,
thinking
and to
CSTO.
condemn it. The Armenians were really in a horrible spot. The Armenians obviously did not approve and were terrified of what Russia's doing because they understand that if Russia starts to reconstitute the former Soviet Union, Armenia is right there. It's one of the former 15 republics. But they made it very clear to members of Congress I spoke to who have good relationships with them that they were just in a bind. They were over a barrel. They needed to just keep their head down. They didn't want to anger the Russians, understandably so. The Armenians, I have a lot of time for the Armenians, and I hope that they are not next. But I predict they will be if Ukraine falls. And for anybody who thinks of the Armenians just as the Kardashians, believe me, this is one of the most ancient cultures that almost predated the Roman Empire and was once an incredibly, incredibly powerful country of its own, empire of its own, with just one of the earliest seats of Christianity. I mean, just an amazing place, and that is a shame. I mean, everything falls and everything changes, and certainly our empire is going to fall very soon, based on what's happening right now, because we've got Caligula and his horse in charge. But but I also just want people to understand that you spare a moment for the Ukraine, for the Armenians, who I think are living in fear of being the next Ukrainians here. So, on that note, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on a holiday weekend. It was incredible to have almost 400 of you on a random Thursday morning again.
In
And
the summer.
yeah, in the summer, we are so deeply grateful to you for this. We are going to be here again next week, Olga. We'll be here next week at 11 a.m. Eastern. We are also going to send out through our own socials the next time we're going to have a town hall like we did last week, probably next week or the week after. As many of you that want to show up, please come. It was just, I don't just say this because we want you to subscribe, become paid subscribers to us. Legitimately, it was just so wonderful to have these conversations with people and just we see all of your names kind of scrolling on our screen as we're doing this, but to actually see your names and see your faces and attach those names to the faces and then to have an actual discussion with you as opposed to us just talking at you as we are right now was really, really great. So please consider doing that. And then I think that's about it. Have a wonderful fourth. You guys, I have one word about the fourth that I just want to put out there from my own perspective. Um, I'm sitting here at a house that I have in Pennsylvania. Usually I'm in New York, but we have a weekend house out in Pennsylvania. And when we bought it from a MAGA people, and there was an American flag. And I said to my husband, "We got to take this down. What is this jingoistic bullshit?" And he said something to me that I thought was incredibly powerful, and he was right. He goes, "They don't own the flag.
Yep.
We don't own the American flag." And we got to take it back. And I said, "You're absolutely right." We actually went and bought a much nicer, less dingy flag that they left us. And it's now flying. You can't see it, but it's flying outside my window here. And I know there's a sense here that things are so depressing and so awful that we um, don't want to be celebrating the 4th of July because it feels like there's not much to celebrate. But I also just want people to know that it's still our country. It's not theirs. They haven't taken it away from us. So, more than ever this year, celebrate what it is that makes us American. And that is not putting people in cages. It is taking care of them and caring for them and not incarcerating them. And that's what I'll be thinking about tomorrow on the 4th of July when I will hopefully figure out how my grill works and make myself a hot dog and a burger.
And I'll just say that, again, I am so with you on that. I used to see the big American flags. Um, and after, the whole MAGA thing, and I used to just like get so disgusted. I'm like, my God, and the fact that they were able to steal from us. And then I remember watching a movie. Um, and the movie basically took place in the Middle East, and people were waiting for American help. And there was a plane that was flying, and and as they landed, like you see this American flag, and like people are like, "Here, here, come, I'm here," and whatever. Anyway, the fact is that it just reminded me that America does so much good. This is our symbol, this is our flag, and we cannot let them take it away, and to reshape who is patriotic, what is patriotism, because this is for the whole country to decide. And the fact that they're trying to separate us and say these people are not patriotic, these people don't belong here, we can't do that. And you see the majority of activity. By the way, just to add one. For 1 second, a news story that we didn't cover. There was another disinformation network, a Russian that was found. This one is called Operation Overlord, and it is using fake AI content, basically to flood all social media with images, videos, websites, impersonating real media pushing racist, anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic narratives. So just to end with this, I mean, you go onto Twitter and you want to like throw up because you think this is all of America, go speak with your neighbors, go connect with people, because even the people who maybe did vote for Trump, I mean, they still have empathy. They're not going to celebrate and cheer like you see on social media, throwing people into concentration camps or, taking or separating mothers and children. So, I mean, I think the bottom line this 4th of July, we went through a lot as a country, strategize how we will strengthen this country and try to get it back.
Wonderful. And whoever just tweeted or posted, sorry, that you just put up a Ukrainian flag and an American flag. Who was that? Let me just go down. Julie. Somebody was my name. We just put up an American flag and a Ukrainian flag. I love that. I love it. Fantastic.
We will
All right.
prevail. We will.
Yes, we will prevail. This too shall pass. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week at 11 a.m. Eastern. To all of you in the United States watching us, happy 4th. To all of you around the world watching us, happy weekend. To all
We're
of
trying
you,
to get our shit together.
yeah,
Everyone around the
yeah.
world.
So all
We're
of you,
working
all of
hard.
you in the United Kingdom watching us, happy War of American Rebellion, or whatever you guys call it out there. We won, but now apparently we want to go back to the monarchy. And some parts of our country want to go back to monarch. So maybe you guys won after all, but we will not let that happen. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye.